I'm intrigued at the lack of women in IT leadership. And as a female leader, it perplexes me. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it.
Now, I'll give this woman some props. At least she admits that she doesn't know why there aren't more women in IT, and more specifically, IT leadership. And in this short 3.5-minute clip, which you can watch down below, she does go on to speculate as to why girls are less interested in IT. And she makes the now almost universal assertion that we need more women in STEM fields, but she stops short of suggesting some patriarchal conspiracy keeping women out of the IT industry. Now, of course, the corollary to the argument that we need more women in STEM fields is, why just STEM fields? Why not other occupations where women are underrepresented, like plumbing, welding, garbage collection, law enforcement? Or similarly, why isn't there a push to get more men into psychology or teaching, fields that are dominated by women? And that's a fair argument, but I think the fundamental premise that we need more women in anything needs to be refuted. Why do we need more women in IT, for example? Are the current crop of IT professionals not cutting it? The fact is, we don't need more women in anything. What we need is the most qualified people for the job. And if the most qualified people for the job are women, then they should get the jobs. It really is that simple. But in this video, I want to take a look at one possible reason why there are less women in the IT industry and perhaps other industries. And it's this: women tend to give up and drop out at much greater rates than men. This finding comes from a study run by a platform where people can practice technical interviewing and in the process find jobs based on their interview performance rather than their resumes. Now, I think this is a great idea because as someone who's had to sort through resumes in the past, the amount of embellishment and outright bullshitting on resumes makes it difficult to sift the wheat from the chaff. So how does it work? Quote, when an interviewer and an interviewee match on our platform, they meet in a collaborative coding environment with voice, text, chat, and a whiteboard and jump right into a technical question. Interview questions on the platform tend to fall into the category of what you'd encounter at a phone screen for a back-end software engineering role. And interviewers typically come from a mix of large companies like Google, Facebook, Twitch, and Yelp, as well as engineering-focused startups like Asana, Mattermark, and others. Then after the interview, the interviewer uses this form to rate the interviewee. And the results? Quote, men were getting advanced to the next round 1.4 times more often than women. Interviewee technical score wasn't faring that well either. Men on the platform had an average technical score of 3 out of 4 as compared to 2.5 out of 4 for women. Despite these numbers, it was really difficult for me to believe that women were just somehow worse at computers. Maybe difficult for you to believe. So when some of our customers asked us to build voice masking to see if that would make a difference in the conversion rates of female candidates, we didn't need much convincing. Now, I wonder if the situation were reversed, if the author would find it hard to believe, or would she be celebrating female technical prowess? Anyway, so they basically were able to mask the voices of interviewees to factor out gender bias by interviewers. And the results? Quote, after running the experiment, we ended up with some rather surprising results. Contrary to what we expected, and probably contrary to what you expected as well, masking gender had no effect on interview performance with respect to any of the scoring criteria. Well, no, that's not contrary to what I expected. That's exactly what I expected. So the author, still scratching her head, dug a little deeper into the data and she found something quite interesting. Quote, women leave interviewing roughly 7 times as often as men after they do badly in an interview. The author then goes on to a speculative thought experiment where she extrapolates the dropout rate or attrition rate in the interviews more broadly to the educational lives of women. Quote, how many attrition events does one encounter between primary and secondary education and entering a collegiate program in computer studies and then starting to embark on a career? So, I don't know, let's say there are 8 of these events between getting into programming and looking around for a job. If that's true, then we need 3 times as many women studying computer science than men to get to the same number in our pipelines. Note, that's 3 times more than men, not 3 times more than there are now. If we think about how many there are now, which depends on your source, it's between 1 in 3 and 1 in 4 of the number of men. To get to pipeline parity, we actually have to increase the number of women studying computer science by an order of magnitude. So basically, if women continue to quit as much as they do now, there's absolutely no way you'll ever reach gender parity in the IT field. Not that gender parity should be a goal of any field of endeavour, just like gender parity shouldn't be a goal in nursing or some other female-dominated field. But let's just put that aside for a second, because all this is very speculative, but it does speak to a wider phenomenon, and the author does cite some studies later in the article that show women generally have less confidence in themselves and don't handle rejection as well as men do. And here's the kicker. Quote, once you factor out interview data from both men and women who quit after 1 or 2 bad interviews, the disparity goes away entirely. So if women would just woman up, grow some ovaries, and not quit so easily, you'd probably see more women in the IT industry. But given the video I did last week that talked about how emotionally fragile young women are today and how we continue to infantilize them, how likely is it that women will become more resilient? And given that feminists continue to argue that our entire society needs to be more women-friendly under the guise of so-called equality, women will probably get less resilient. You can't take a philosophy of listen and believe into the workplace. It encourages the sort of childish behaviour that sees women cry sexism just because they got knocked back from a job. That's not empowerment. All that does is promote mediocrity because you're unwilling to compete in a meritocracy.